Good afternoon, everyone. We would just like to welcome you to Using Google to Enhance Writing. We're so glad that you could be with us today in this session of the Summer Learning Blast from Wayne Risa. I'm here today with my colleague, Laura Gabriel, and I am Michelle Wagner, and we are both literacy consultants here at Wayne Risa. And we both share a love of instructional technology and a history of teaching online. Both Laura and I have been teaching online for over a decade. And so we're excited to share a few of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way with you. So Laura will be manning the back channel today. So if you have any questions that you'd like to pose in the question and answer section, please feel free to do that. That's the best way to get a question right to Laura. And then we'll use the chat more for introductions of yourself if you want to just tell us where you're from. And then also anytime during the session, if you have ideas or pieces that have worked well for you when facilitating online, please share those within the chat button so that all of our colleagues can see those. When we think about high quality literacy instruction, we're really not sure what the fall holds for us. It's so hard to know exactly what 2020, 2021 will look like. But one thing we do know is if we focus on the literacy essentials, then we're going to be in really good shape. Because no matter where we're in school or how school looks, we know that focusing on those essential literacy practices is what we need to do to make sure that students move forward in literacy. So just to get started, if you could take a moment and in the chat, share what is the last thing that you personally wrote and what tool did you use to write? So just take a moment to think about the last thing you actually wrote, whatever that might have been. It might have been something serious, something funny, and just tell us what it was. Was it a text message? Was it an email? What was it? Was it an essay? And what you used to write that? If you could just add that into the chat for us. And I'm going to encourage Laura to share a few of the things that she's seeing in that chat.
Hi, I just want to also let people know that when you type into the chat, make sure that you select all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, just Michelle and I will see your responses. But we've got a personal inspirational note and a graduation card, a Facebook post, text message, email, thanking a teacher for her service. So a lot of writing has been going on in the last few days.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. And so what I'm lifting from what Laura just shared is that we are all in fact writers. And not only are we all writers, but many of those examples that Laura just shared, things such as Facebook posts or emails, those are things that we're doing in the digital realm. So not only are we all writers, but we all typically use digital tools as well. So we're really hoping that when we go through some of these ideas, that it's not seen as an additional layer or something extra, but really just a way to enhance what it is that we're already doing. We also know that we're about to share a lot of information. And so please don't get overwhelmed if there seems to be a lot coming at you. The session is being recorded and we will share it back with you. So if you miss something or you feel as if you'd want to go back and explore one of these pieces in a little bit more detail, our hope is that that recording will help you with that. When we think about good writing, I always like to go back to the essential instructional practices in early literacy. And so we're sharing those links with you in the chat right now, because whatever we do with writing, whatever digital tool we might use, they are worthless without the essential instructional practices. Just using a tool for the sake of using a tool is not good practice. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is for a specific reason. And right now, one of the greatest reasons we have is that we're connecting with students in different ways. And so we really do need to rely on instructional technology in ways that we haven't before. With that said, we want to refer you back to the Literacy Essentials online modules. They're available at literacyessentials.org. If any of these practices pique your interest, we would highly encourage you to go into these Literacy Essential online modules and explore them. You can receive sketches for your time, and they're just filled with great practical ideas on how to really boost literacy in your classroom. So we highly recommend that you take some time to explore those. And again, those are available at literacyessentials.org. So when we talk about Google, it's kind of a big term, but what generally we're referring to when we talk about Google are all things included within the G Suite. So to access all of the apps and tools within G Suite, you'll click on that waffle, and that waffle will be visible if you go to google.com. So as long as you're enrolled or you're logged into your school account, when you go to google.com, you'll see this waffle, and that's where all the magic happens. So if you've never clicked on that waffle, that's where you're going to have access to things like Google Docs, Google Calendars, and hopefully some other tools that you might not be familiar with. So the first tool I'd like to explore with you is one of my very favorites. It's Google Keep, keep.google.com. Google describes this product as something that allows you to capture whatever's on your mind. I like to think of it as my own personal digital sticky note collection that always goes with me. So really it allows you to take notes in a very convenient manner. It's one of the few Google tools that I actually like the app for my cell phone better than the official product that I use on my desktop. So I highly encourage you to download that app on your cell phones. My favorite thing about having it on my cell phone is that I can set reminders that are location based. And right now, when I'm not necessarily in the office every single day, it's nice to be able to set a reminder so that the next time I get to my work, it will remind me to do something. So if I really want to grab that book by Hattie the next time I'm at my office, I can set my office address in my phone using Google Keep. And when I get to that location, I'll get that reminder that comes up. So whether that happens today, tomorrow, or next week, it'll send me that reminder. So that's very helpful. So within Google Keep, I tend to use two functions more than all the rest. So you can see there, it really does look like just a collection of sticky notes. But I use the notes and reminders more than anything else. So when you think about the notes that you can add, I like to have students brainstorm different ideas they might want to write about. That way when I'm engaged in Writer's Workshop, I don't have to stop and have those brainstorming sessions every day. They can have an ongoing list of different topics that they might be able to write about when they finish a piece, because we always want students engaged in writing activities, not just things that are like writing or similar to writing. We want them actually writing. So this is one hint or helpful tip to actually keep the students engaged in writing, is to have them make a list of different stories they might like to write. Within that note, you can add collaborators, so you can share your list of ideas with mom, dad, a friend in the classroom, or your teacher. You can see here that those collaborators show up at the bottom, so this particular note has been shared with 3 people. Another thing that you can do within Google Keep is actually add images to the notes themselves. So this is super helpful if you're assessing work or you're looking at a student's writing and you want to remember to bring something up about a specific part of a student's writing. You can take a picture of that writing, or you can actually do a screenshot if you're only working with digital writing. But it's a great way to have it right there in the notes, so it's all in one place. You can also change the color of each note, which is super important if you're a teacher, because I know we all like to color code our stuff. So that's a great way just to separate things just by different topics. So you might have all of your science notes in green and all of your literacy notes in blue. Or if you're a secondary teacher, you might have first hour in pink and second hour in gray. However you like to organize that, it's just another way to keep yourself organized. And the last thing that you can do is you can actually pin the notes. So if you pin the notes, they're kind of stuck to the very top of your Google Keep. So when you log into Google Keep, they'll be at the very top of your board, which is very helpful for those things that you want at top of mind. When we think about why we might want to use this tool, I think about the fact that one of our main jobs as teachers is to coach children as they're engaged in that writing process. We want to make sure that we're providing them with the feedback they need to move themselves forward. So I might engage in a writing conference with a student and I keep some notes on what we decided. And then I could share that note with the child so he keeps in mind what it was that he was supposed to focus on. So for example, here's Liam, and his writing focus is going to be to read his writing aloud after he finishes it, and then to touch each period and double check that the next letter is capitalized. You can see the comments there are very simple. They're written so that the student can understand them, and there's not too much. We're really focusing on what it was that he needed to move his writing ever so much forward. I can then share this note with Liam so that he has access to it later. And I can also set a reminder. Maybe I'm going to set a reminder to come back to the student and talk to him about his writing at a different time. And so I can set that up right within here, and that works in conjunction with your calendar. So it's just a great way to keep everything connected. I do want to say, and I know this goes almost without saying, that assigning writing is not the same as teaching writing. So we want to be mindful that just because something has been put into Google Keep, it does not necessarily mean that the child understands it. So we would never want to just put messages in Google Keep without explaining what they meant. So that writing conference piece is critical, but this Google Keep piece can help keep you organized. Next, we're going to kind of now zoom out to Google Drive. When we think about all of the apps and all of the pieces within Google, Google Drive is that place where everything is housed. It's that giant folder in the sky that keeps track of all of our stuff. So simply put, it's synchronized storage, which means as you work on something, it's automatically saved into your Google Drive. There's a great peace of mind in that you don't have to continually push save. So anybody who lived through the 90s remembers those horrifying moments when you realized that you forgot to save something in WordPerfect or Microsoft Word. You had those oh no moments. In Google, you really don't have those oh no moments anymore, because even if you lose internet, it still saves the next time you come on, and it also doesn't lose anything that happened before that loss of power. You can also go to Google Drive to start a new document. So simply clicking that new button will allow you to open up a new document, sheet, or slides. One piece that I would love to point out is that more button. Whenever you click more in Google, magic happens. That's where you get options that don't normally appear. So here you can see by clicking on that more, you get access to Google Forms, Google Drawings, Google Sites, and more. So I would encourage you, anytime you see a more button within Google, click it and see what new magic lies behind it. I also want to share a few shortcuts that can help you and your students. These shortcuts are all Chrome specific, which means you have to be using Chrome as your internet browser in order to see them. So this address bar is actually called the Omnibox, which I just learned recently. So if you put a shortcut in this Omnibox or address bar, you can get to a new document relatively easy. So simply by searching there in that address bar, docs.new, sheets.new, slides.new, or my favorite, forms.new, you'll start a brand new form or a brand new doc or a brand new sheet. And it can just save you some time so that you don't always have to go through Google Drive. So it's a great shortcut to help with your students and just learning how to start something brand new. Another thing that I want to lift for you within Google Drive is the idea of privacy. One thing really nice about Google Drive is you're able to share all sorts of media in the way that you want to share it. So for example, here's a video, and I might want to share this video on YouTube if it was something I wanted to make visible to the entire world. And that would work just fine, but it would be visible to the whole world. When we're working with young children, however, we rarely want to make something visible to the whole world. So simply housing it within your Google Drive allows you to share a link with the specific people that you want to share a link with. So that might be family members, that might be fellow teachers, that might be classmates. But you're able to really control who you're sharing that with, which can be very helpful. So again, I encourage you to really think about who it is that you want to share a specific media with, and then open that up to just those people. One thing that G Suite for Education does is it adds an extra layer of security. If you've ever shared something with your whole organization, you'll know that that's the default. It's easier to share within your whole organization than to make something publicly visible. If you want to make it publicly visible, there's almost another click or step that you need. So I encourage you to make sure that you're sharing it with the fewest people as possible that meets your needs. Onto Google Docs. When we think about Google Docs kind of are a no-brainer when we think about writing, because Google Docs is very much like Microsoft Word in that it's a word processing program, but it's one of those programs that we all tend to think of when we think about writing. So we just want to cover a few ways that maybe you haven't thought of before for using Google Docs. The first one is something that I typically ignore when I go into Google. So if you go to docs.google.com, the first thing you're going to see are templates. And usually I just click right past them and start a new document, but they're really great in terms of creating something that looks a little more professional. a little bit nicer. So it's nice to encourage students to use these, to know that they're there just to help them with formatting and making things look a little more polished. So I'd encourage you all to check out those templates. Another piece that we can do within Google Docs is offer feedback. When we think about feedback, we know that it is the most powerful single modification that can enhance achievement. John Hattie says it best. He really wants us to think about if they're hearing what it is that we're saying. So when I think about feedback, especially as it relates to the essentials, I want to think about what students are doing right now and what I need to tell them or help them with to get them to the next level of success, constantly nudging them forward, giving them a little bit more so that they're able to continue to grow as writers. So specifically, when I think about writing, I need to be looking at which writing strategies they're currently using and what's not being used, and start to really build their skill set. When I look at the 4 or 5 essentials, it's even more explicit in that we need to give explicit feedback. And as teachers, we're really used to doing this face-to-face, where we sit next to a child and saddle up next to them, looking at their writing and really helping them understand what it is that they need to do in order to improve. But this is really important in the digital world as well. So when I think about feedback in Google Docs, I think about using that comment feature. So you can see there the arrow is pointing to the little comment button, and when you click on that, it'll open up the comment box within your Google Doc. That is where I can go ahead and write in what it is that the student is doing well and what they might need to do to improve. This comment is only viewable by the people who have access to the document. So if the student has only shared the document with you, you and the child are the only ones who are going to see that information, which gives you comfort in knowing that that's confidential. It's also nice because if you think about the times when you've gotten back a paper with red marks all over it and someone has really destroyed your writing, this keeps that from happening because those comments are embedded on the side and they don't actually overwrite what the child writes. The child will have to actually make the changes on his or her own computer, and they'll have to decide whether the feedback is worth taking or not. So that gives the child some control over whether or not they take the ideas that you've mentioned. So a couple of good tips for including in that feedback box. You really want to clarify the learning target. What is it that you asked the child to do? What was the goal of this writing? And then give them some hints, those helpful hints of what they can do next to really improve, to get to that next level. I also would caution you not to use too many comments on a single student's paper, even though we want to say a whole lot, and maybe if we were face-to-face, we would say a whole lot. It comes across very differently when you're writing it. So just limit those thoughts just to maybe 1 or 2 pieces of feedback per paper, per time. You can help students find the feedback by including in that chat box, that comment box, the student's email with the plus sign before it. So plus and then the student's email. And what that will do is it will generate an email for that child that links both to the feedback that you provided as well as the actual document. So this is really nice, especially if you're working in something that has multiple pages. This will take them right to the spot in the document where your comment was made. So it's a great way to assign this to a specific child. It can also be used with colleagues. So we use this all the time at Wayne Resa when we need someone else's feedback on a specific part. So we're assigning it to our colleague just so that they get that email in their inbox, because it makes it so much easier than saying, hey, could you look at that document that I shared with you 2 weeks ago? That can be hard to find. So this just brings it to the top of the inbox. Another piece, so if you think back to the Google Keep, one thing that Google does really well is integrate their products together. So on the right-hand corner or the right-hand side, you can see the little icon for Google Keep. And if you click on that, what it will do is open up a side menu of all the notes that you've written. So here you can see I can take that writing conference note, and while I'm looking at the child's most recent writing, I can look at that note that I had for that child and see if the student took those pieces that we talked about in our last writing conference and applied those to his or her writing. So it's just a great way to keep those integrated so that you're using that note over and over again to keep track of where the child is. So it just helps kind of bring everything together. Another piece that you can do with the same little comment function is the idea of tagging parents. So encouraging students to share their writing with their families, especially when they get to the point when they're ready to publish. And remembering that publishing doesn't mean that it's perfect, it just means we're ready to share it. So we can go ahead and put in the plus sign and then the parent's email address, and it will do just what it did for the student to the parent. It will share that document with the parent, and it will allow them to see what the child is writing. The nice thing about this too is if you're sharing it with the parent and the share settings haven't been set appropriately where that parent would be able to see it, when he or she pushes the comment button, it will prompt them to share it with that parent as well. So it's nice, it just kind of does it right there, so we don't have to worry about whether or not the parents will be able to see it. It will prompt us. Okay. When we think about how important it is to collaborate with our families, this is a great way to really lean into our families and help them see the connection to their writing with their families. And so to have that collaboration with our families is so important. So this is just a way to make that link very explicit. And we see that again replicated in the 4 or 5 essentials as well, just the importance of bringing families into the literacy time. So when we think about ourselves as teachers, it's important that we also think of ourselves as fellow learners. I'll give you just a second to read this quote from Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher. Students need to see us not just as teachers, but as fellow learners of writing, people who engage in writing for all sorts of purposes and who are consistently getting better at it. None of us are the perfect writer yet, but we're all on a journey to become just a little bit better each and every time we pick up a pen or a pencil. So I'd encourage you to share your writing. One of the easiest ways to do this within Google is to actually show your students that version history. If you don't know about version history within Google Docs, this is like magic for teachers. Version history allows you to see what changes have been made and by whom. So when we think about sharing our writing with students, a lot of times students see writing as something that they struggle with. And so this is a great way to make sure that they know everyone struggles with writing, but we embrace that struggle. And through that struggle, our writing turns into something magnificent. So when we show our students the writing process, you can see that what has been taken out, what has been added, how long it took to be added, who added it, and what changes were made. And it's so important for students to see this because writing isn't always a clean process. It's often messy, and just showing our students how we worked through that is very powerful. I encourage you to share your writing. One other piece about the writing, the version history, is that it can also help you catch where things went wrong, and especially in a collaborative essay or work. So that version history will let you see when something was deleted or added. So that can be helpful for a teacher if you're looking for what happened here, where did the mistake happen, so that you can correct it. So let's go ahead and pause here. And if you wouldn't mind just entering into the chat, what are some ways that you might share your writing with your students? Maybe you've done this in the past. You can share what you've already done or what you're thinking about doing in the future. And I'll invite Laura. Laura, would you mind sharing a few of the ideas that might be popping up?
We have a video or Screencastify showing messy outlines and brainstorms. Zoom, sharing the screen in Zoom. And modeling writing with the class.
Those are brilliant ideas too. I really like the video element as well. Just that idea of actually showing them in a recorded fashion, the process. Screencastify, it's not a part of this presentation, but it's one of my favorite digital tools in terms of just being able to record your process. So thank you for sharing that. So lots of great ideas. So this is definitely important, and I would always encourage you to share the messiness of writing, because it is through that messiness that we end up with a really great finished product. And then reminding our students that something doesn't have to be perfect in order for us to publish or share it. Okay, so moving on, Gmail. Gmail is one of those tools that we all use pretty much every day, sometimes more than we would like. If you're anything like Laura and I, we're sending emails constantly. But this is a skill that has to be taught. And I'm sure that you've received those emails that just go on for way too long, or those emails that don't contain enough information. And what that does is it reminds me that writing a good email is something that has to be learned. We all learn about how to do that. So when we think about the literacy essentials and leaning back on why we would spend class time, valuable class time, showing students how to write an email, we want to remember that we need to give students opportunities to write in a variety of ways, for a variety of purposes and audiences. So we think about emails. A lot of my emails contain lots of opinions and a lot of explanations, and they're almost always to varied audiences. On a given day, I might write to 15 or 20 different audiences. And that's what professionals do. And so we want to teach our students how to do that because they're going to need those skills in the workplace. Same thing when we get to those 4 or 5 essentials. We just want to make sure that we're giving students the time and the opportunity to write with these digital tools and to engage different audience members. So when we think about emails, basically we're communicating, but there are various expectations that would help in the email world. So if we think about replying, if you've ever been on a reply all message where somebody doesn't know that they're replying to all, or maybe they just don't realize they are, that can be corrected by just teaching someone to, instead of putting all of the recipients in the to box, to BCC them, so to blind copy them. So instead of sending it to the whole organization where I can see that I sent it to the whole organization, I send it in the BCC line. And what that does is when someone clicks reply to all, it still only comes to me. So it can be very helpful for reducing the amount of clutter in your email, or to reduce embarrassment. If you've ever been like me and accidentally replied all, that can be rather embarrassing. So it's just something that we want to teach and show our students so that they have that skill set. We also want to share with them that subject line, that's really where we want to give somebody a taste of what's in that email. If you've ever gotten an email where the subject line didn't match at all what it says in the body of the email, that can be frustrating, especially if someone says, I have a quick question, and then in the subject line, they tell you it's a quick question, but in the body of the email, it's very clear that it's not a quick question. So it's just one of those things. We want to make sure that we're helping our students to see what goes in each of those spots within an email. You can use Gmail as well as a great way to have pen pals, both inside the school organization and without the school organization. So for example, my son this year, he was in 2nd grade, he had a pen pal that was in a local senior center. So he would write emails to the senior and she would write back. So it was a way for them to communicate that was different than the old-fashioned paper and pencil. And so he really looked forward to getting those weekly emails from Miss Debbie. So it's just a great way, especially since stamps are so expensive now, this is a great way to have a pen pal. It's also a good way to share writing. You can attach files and share them in a very easy manner. So this is a good way to share that kind of writing with other people. And also it's a good way to teach students to advocate for themselves. If you've ever sent an email complaining about a service or a product, you know that what you're doing is advocating for yourself. And that's a skill we want to teach our students. We want them to have a voice, to question, and to ask questions. And so email can really give them that opportunity. So there's a lot we can do within Gmail. And if it's something that's open to your students, I would encourage you to use it with them. It's a great tool. All right, moving on. Google Calendar. Thank goodness for Google Calendar. It's what keeps me organized in both my personal and professional life. But it also can help your students to stay organized. So I really debated whether or not to include this in this session because it's not your typical writing tool. However, I think we can use it to teach writing skills. And what I mean by that is when you click that create button and you start a new event, yes, you can add your title, and yes, you can link it to your Google Meet, and yes, you can invite guests, and all of that is very important. And all of that is an important skill to teach our students. But when you look at that more options, when you click that, that offers you the opportunity to add a description. And this is where I would encourage students to actually write some narrative where they can explain what it is that's going to happen during this event. So that might be a description of what to expect. So if it's a picnic or if it's a writing conference, they could write a little bit about what they wanted to talk about at that writing conference or what it is that they wanted to share. So there's just more information than what you would typically see. So I would encourage you to use this as an opportunity to write. And then also this is an opportunity for students to practice, again, a skill that they're going to need to help them stay organized in their adult lives as well. Google Slides. Google Slides is another one of my very favorites. I tend to use Google Slides a lot because I used to be a huge PowerPoint fan. So back in the day when I would create different worksheets and just visual aids for my students, I used PowerPoint a lot because I could manipulate the shapes and sizes of things a little bit easier. And the same is true of Google Slides. So here are some ways you may not have thought to use Google Slides. So one of the pieces that you can do within Google Slides is if you go to the Insert menu, you can select Video. And if you select Video, it will let you do just that, insert a video. You can see there that when you insert a video, by default, a YouTube button or option pops up. And that's because Google owns YouTube. So it's always giving you that option to integrate the services that it owns and has. So you can type in any YouTube video that you have and you can insert it right into your presentation. So this is really handy if you're doing online education in any way because you don't have to navigate out of the presentation. It will just play within the presentation. It's also great because if you're using a G Suite for Education account, it automatically takes off those ads when you add it to your presentation. So that can be helpful. As a former middle school teacher, I know that a deodorant ad can completely derail my literacy lesson. So by inserting it into a slide deck like this, I can help lock down what's shown to my students and just keep it focused on the content and not have to worry about those ads. You can also see that you can search by URL. So if you have a video that's just on the internet somewhere, you can find it there and you can insert it. That doesn't always work. It does work best with the YouTubes because YouTube and Google are owned by the same company. But the last option that I want to show you is that Google Drive option. So when you think about Google Drive, that is if you have your videos housed there, that's a great way to be able to find them in an easy way. So for example, if I click on my Google Drive, you can see that I have the videos that I have recorded and put into my Google Drive. So these could be videos that are shared with me by my students, or they could be videos that I have uploaded to my Drive myself. But when I embed them into my presentation, I can share them in a very organized way. So one way that I might share is I might have students record themselves reading their own writing. So here you can see a student and you can see in front of her is her writing. This is something that she set up on her desk and kind of pointed down. So it's kind of a strange angle, but you can see that she has in front of her a writing piece that she's going to share. So this could be hypothetically shared in a presentation where each slide belongs to a different child and every child embeds their own video. So then we could share that with the class and the whole class could see what writing has been done by which students. And so it's a great way to have a writing publishing party, even when we're not in class together. So when we think about this, this again is just another way to get those voices in the classroom. And because it's in Google Drive, we don't have to worry about it being shared publicly. One other thing that you can do is once you've inserted the video, if you click on that format options, it opens up this magic menu to the right, which will allow you to decide where you want to start the video and where you want to stop the video. So this is great when students are creating their own videos because a lot of times there will be some setup where there's some wasted space. So some space where maybe the video camera is being set up and then the actual reading of the writing starts at about 10 seconds. You can make this video start at 10 seconds and end at whenever the video is supposed to end. This also works with longer YouTube videos where you might want to only show the middle 4 minutes of a video, or you just want to show a 2-minute clip. You can do this and then you don't have to fumble through the fast forward or the clicking through during your presentation. It'll just be right there for you. So that's one of my favorite features. When I think about having students record themselves, I'm constantly coming back to this literacy essential of the fact that one of my main jobs as a teacher is to help students be excited about reading and writing. And for whatever reason, nothing makes young people more excited than videotaping themselves. So this is just a way to kind of latch onto that. that selfie mentality and give students an opportunity to record themselves. So I would encourage you to use this as a way to get students to share their writing. All right, another piece that we want to make sure is that we're giving students the chance to identify themselves as successful readers and writers. These children are authors, and we want to really shine a light on that. One way that you can generate some excitement is really to encourage students to share their love of reading and writing. So what it is that they're reading or writing, we want them to be able to share it. So here's a presentation that I created, just a very simple template. And within this, I could share this with my students and have them share a picture of themselves with what they're reading or writing. So this could be great for students who want to take a selfie of their latest book that they're reading, or who want to take a picture of their reading. And then over in the blank space, they could actually describe that. So super helpful. And this is something that I could share with them as a template so that they could edit the pieces that I wanted them to edit, but not really move around too much of the background pieces. So it gives them some structure. Another way you can use Google Slides is to change the view that you as the creator are looking at. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of any slide presentation, you'll have your typical presentation view, and then you'll have the gallery view. So you can see the arrow there pointing to the gallery view. If I click that, it will take me to something that looks like this. Now in my mind, this reminds me a lot of Padlet. So I can see multiple slides at one time. I can kind of get a bird's eye view of what's happening on each slide. If this was my classroom, I might have each slide assigned to a particular student. So that offers lots of opportunities for me to talk to students about personal space. Just like we would in the classroom, we can talk about digital personal space and how you don't want to mess with anyone else's space on a slide. So that's theirs, and we want to preserve that for them. So we can share it in that way, but we can also get a really quick look at what's happening across the board in our classroom. So if you think about this as something other than what you're seeing now, this could be just a space for students to give a quick answer to a question. And then as the teacher, you could go to this view and scroll quickly through and maybe highlight a few answers. So it's just a way to see something in a little different light. As we think about sharing templates and ideas with users, there are some different tricks and tips to sharing the links so that it is shared in a way that makes sense for you. So most of us are familiar with copying a link from a presentation, but there are a couple of things we can do differently and that you've already had a little bit of experience with during this session. So what do I mean by that? So if you want to share something and you want to force people to make a copy of your presentation, and this also works in Docs, if I look at the original share link, you can see it's this long link, and at the end, and with backslash, edit, and then some other words. If I take everything from that final backslash out and replace it with the word copy, it will prompt something that looks like this when someone tries to open it. So it'll force someone to make a copy before they even can see it. So what this will do, if you're one of those people who shares a lot, you're used to getting emails that say, hey, can I have access to this? Or you forgot to give me editing access, or I can't change anything. This will stop that from happening because it automatically forces a person to make a copy before they can even see it. One thing to keep in mind is that whoever you're sharing it with would have to have a Google account in order to be able to make a copy. Another way you can share it is to share a template. So again, if you look at that last bit, that slug, if we change that last bit to template/preview, that will create something like this. So this is actually how I shared today's presentation with you. I really like this particular way of sharing, especially in slides, because it allows you to see a preview of what the presentation looks like, and then to click Use Template. So you get to make a copy of it. It does the same thing as the make a copy, but it allows you to see what it looks like first. Another piece that you can do within the slides is to edit the master. So if you've never done this, this is really, really helpful. So you're going to go to View, and then you are going to go to Master. And that'll open up what you see on the right. It's that kind of grayed out version. And Once you change things within that grayed out version, they're in the template. So no one can move them around. No one can change where they are. They'll only be able to change what's on top of them. So it kind of puts it on a layer that can't be reached. So what does that mean? So if you look at this, this is great for younger learners, but it's really great for anyone. So when the template's put in place, it allows them to edit the text boxes. You can see there the text boxes over top of that very simple story organizer. So students would be able to enter in a beginning, a middle, and an end, but they wouldn't be able to adjust the circles. They wouldn't be able to change where the hat was on the snowman or to edit any of that. They would just basically be writing on top of that background. So it just kind of moves it to a different layer. So this can be great for any sort of graphic organizer, just to keep people organized. Another piece that you can do is if you think about your Google Slides presentation as a piece of paper, you can really adjust that page setup. I do this all the time, and in fact, I did it with the snowman image that you just saw. So what I do is I think of the slide as a piece of paper. And so I change the slide size to a custom slide size, and I make it 8.5 by 11. And then I really look at it as, okay, this is something that can be printed. What is it going to look like? I do this all the time. I even do this sometimes for documents that I'm writing, especially if there's a lot of graphics or pictures or just anything that doesn't fit within a typical Google Doc. So a lot of infographics, I'll typically build the whole document within Google Slides, and then I save it as a PDF. So that's definitely an option you can do. And then there you can see, instead of it being the typical presentation that you're used to, it's that much more vertical look that looks almost like a piece of paper. Next we have Blogger. I feel like I'm almost out of breath. I hope I'm not throwing too many pieces at you, but the next tool we want to share with you is Blogger. And Blogger is Google's own blogging tool. So it's the app they use for blogging. So when you think about publishing a blog, this is a wonderful tool if you want to publish multiple pieces and you want to keep track of how many people have seen your blog and on what date those blogs were published. So here's one of my own personal blogs. You can see I can go by date and look at the blogs that were published. And then I can also see the most recent one is on top. The one caution that I have for you, and this is a big one, is that Blogger is publicly accessible. So you really want to think about who the audience is for this blog and whether or not it's appropriate to share it publicly in this way. So I would encourage you to talk to your tech department. And these times of remote learning, your tech department is really your best friend, and find out if this is something that's even permissible in your district. But if it is, you want to make sure that you're getting families' permission so that they know what it is that you're sharing. So if you're not completely comfortable with sharing student writing in a public blogger or a blog, you might want to consider using Google Sites for your blog. So if we think about all the things you can do within a Google site, you can create a writing portfolio. And just like any other Google site, you can really embed anything you'd like. So anything within Drive is really easy to link within a Google site. So you could have videos of the student reading and writing. You could have digital copies of the actual writing. You could have links to the docs. But this is a chance for you to share it with the people that you want to share it with. So again, you're controlling who has access. So when I think about Blogger being publicly accessible, Google Sites really limits who has access. So this is something that the teacher could say, you know what, only the students in my classroom are going to have access to one another's blogs. And then each child could create their own Google site and share that on maybe a class site. So I use Google Sites all the time. But this would be a way for the teacher to create a list of names, each one hyperlinked to the child's individual blog. So that's one way to do it. You could also use Google Sites anytime you would normally create a hyperdoc. In fact, I like to think about Google Sites as just a pretty hyperdoc. So that's an option as well. If you decide that you're going to make Google Sites your go-to for blogs or portfolios, I would encourage you to make a template, especially for those younger students, where you create the site with kind of the shell of what you would want included, and then you click Duplicate Site. The more that you duplicate the site, the more options students will have. So you can duplicate one for each child in your classroom and let them personalize their own blog or their own portfolio. Moving right along, we have Google Meet. Lots of us are familiar with Google Meet, but I would encourage you to use it for writing as a way to have those writing conferences with students, those one-on-one discussions with children about their own writing. So this is a great opportunity just to connect with a child and to have her or him just share their writing with you, and then look for those ways to move them forward in their writing. What is it that they're doing well, and what can you encourage them to do just to nudge them forward ever so much? When we think about writing conferences, there's no right or wrong way to have a writing conference, and there are always so many different ways that we can take it, but we just want to make sure that we're personalizing it for each individual student. So not all children are going to need the same writing instruction at the same time, but they all need writing instruction. So it's a way just to nudge them forward. We can also use Google Meet as a way to engage in small group instruction. So just to pull a small group of students together so that we can have those conversations for those students who are working on similar skills, or who maybe want to share their writing together. Maybe they're all at a similar place in the writing process. And this is just one of those opportunities to group in a different way, to really think about what it is that I want to talk about with these students when I bring them together, to share ideas. It's very possible that I want one child to share an idea for how he or she got through a stumbling block in writing, because we can all benefit from learning from one another's process. Next, Jamboard. Jamboard's a relatively new tool, so if you're not familiar with it, again, it's available in the waffle. If you don't see it at the top like you do on mine, you can click on the More, which will show up down below, and you can find Jamboard. One thing you may not know about all of those icons within your waffle too is that if you click on them and drag them around, you can rearrange them so that they better meet your needs. When we think about Jamboard, it really is a shared space where you can add collaborative Post-it notes to a single board. So here I've asked that people include their favorite stories. You can see some people wrote them on Post-it notes and some people cut and pasted their pictures, but they're all here. And just like anything else within Google, I can choose who I share it with. We did discover today, so this is a shout out to my colleague Judy Bowling over in the Instructional Technology. She shared with us today that there is a limit of 50 participants on any collaborative Jamboard. So just in case you have large class sizes, you can only have 50 people collaborating at any given time. But it is a way for you to share a lot of ideas quickly, so in a very shared space. So, and it works like anything else, you get to decide who you share it with, and then it's publicly visible. And again, housed within your Google Drive. That brings us towards the end, where I just want to again give a shout out to the Literacy Essentials. Each one of these tools in and of themselves is just fun to play with, but they're not worth anything unless we're using them to get to the heart of good sound writing instruction. And for that good sound writing instruction, I would refer you back to the Literacy Essentials. Here we can find online modules that really walk us through what these practices look like. And hopefully we can layer those practices with what we already know about instructional technology in order to determine how these might be implemented in our classroom. We also want to invite you all to engage in more learning with us during our Summer Learning Blitz. I believe Laura is going to put into the chat right now a link to our Summer Learning Blitz sessions. If you enjoyed today's session, and we certainly hope that you did, we hope that you join us again in the future for future sessions. One thing that we are doing is we would encourage you to register even if you might not be available at that time, because we will record the session and send it to you afterwards. So if you're interested in getting the information, that's the best way. With that, we'd definitely like to thank you for coming today. And we'd ask that you just take a minute to share a little bit about where you're coming from and whether or not the session met your needs. So the easiest way to do that is to go to tinyurl.com/blitzresa, or you can follow the QR code on the screen. I believe Laura is also putting a direct link right into the chat for you that you can click on and just give us a little feedback. We'd really appreciate you just taking the moment just to tell us a little bit about how you felt at the end of this session. We would also like to open it up for any questions that you might have. So if you have any questions for us that you'd like to put into that Q&A section, I'll ask that Laura just unmute herself and let us know what people are saying, what questions you might have.
So one question, Michelle, was how did you get the video for small group with everyone like that? Is there separate software?
Great question. So that one, I actually use the records function within Zoom to do that. I have also done it within Google Meet where I just use Screencastify. Screencastify, if you're using the free version, only will let you, I think it's 5 minutes. It limits you to 5 minutes, but I just used the record function within Zoom. And that's also an opportunity too, if you have students who are having a book talk or a literacy circle that you'd like to record, you can actually have the discussion recorded, let the students know and get their permission, of course, but record it and then share it out for discussion about how the rest of the class might engage in similar practices in their small group.
There was a question, Michelle, about Jamboard. So just what exactly is Jamboard and how do you use it?
Sure. It's very similar to it's very similar in design to maybe like a Padlet or a collaborative space. So if you think about it, it's just a blank bulletin board where multiple people can staple different ideas. But instead of stapling, we're actually putting a digital Post-it note on there. So jamboard.google.com will take you to the Jamboard site, or you can get to it from that waffle. And I would encourage you just to play around with it. You can just click on a little sticky note icon over on the left. You can click on and just write a note. And then you can see that if you share it with someone else, they can also write a note. So it's just a way to get some quick ideas compiled very visually and very quickly. All right, if there are no more questions, we would like to just take this opportunity to say thank you one more time for coming and joining with us today.